it makes parents feel like failures. Because something that people always neglect to mention is that for things like frustration, if you have a highly surgent child, they are way more fast to frustration, way more likely to start screaming at you. Was that the same doctor as you had last time? Like, that delivered your baby? Welcome back to Developmental Psychology 101, I think we're running with, where in this series I walk you through all of the developmental psychology lectures I gave when I was a lecturer at a university to second year students, except I do it with like actual relevant stuff to you, how it would make sense to you rather than basically just talking about the theories. What I found really interesting in last week's episode was that a lot of the things I talked about weren't actually in my lecture slides, and that's because over the last 2 years I have been basically a developmental psychology teacher on social media, and I have been researching new topics, new content almost every week. So I had so much more to add to that lecture than I did when I was a developmental psychology lecturer to begin with. And I've been teaching developmental psychology since 2015. So like, why I learned so much in the last 2 years when I had a child and a full-time job rather than when I was a PhD student or teaching developmental psychology, I will never really understand. But anyways, it will be amazing if I ever get to teach developmental psychology again, to be able to add all of this new and relevant stuff in, because I teach like 20-year-olds this content, and those 20-year-olds will one day be parents. So it might actually be useful to not just teach them the theories and stuff that they need for their degree and their course, but also to teach them the important stuff. Anyways, we're in my kitchen to make a coffee, except I am currently not making a coffee because I'm too busy talking to you. So I'm going to stop talking to you, make a coffee, then we're going to go sit down in my office and go through the second part of the attachment lecture. We'll see how many slides we get through today, because half an hour as a video was too long. I think we're going to aim for 15 minutes this week. We'll see how we go. Okay, so where we left off in the last Attachment 101 lecture was we talked about attachment theory, we've talked about Bowlby, we've talked about Ainsworth, we've talked about the strange situation and the different attachment styles, and that the secure attachment style is obviously the one you want for your kid. And that the most effective way to do that is to respond to your child with sensitive care and warmth and things like that, at least 50% of the time accurately. Like, we're trying to aim for pretty good responsivity as much as we can, but knowing that life gets in the way. If you've got more than one kid, that can be a bit chaotic. You might be in the bathroom, like all of these kinds of things, and that's okay. So that's all we got up to with that. Now, the really interesting thing is that the theory of attachment, so not attachment itself, but the theory of attachment is super Western. So it's actually super weird, which is Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. Yeah, that's a really fun acronym that I used to teach my students, and I still thoroughly enjoy it. So it follows the idea of a nuclear family, right? And I'm just reading off of my slides because I literally haven't looked at these. I just opened them and we're going to look at them as we go. So it follows the idea of a nuclear family, which is 2 parents and a certain number of children, like a nucleus. So the idea here is that there is one primary caregiver and one parent that works. So you've got a mum that stays at home and a parent that works. I mean, think about when this theory was kind of designed and observed. It was in the 60s and 70s when we still had a pretty traditional home where women mostly worked on caregiving and child rearing activities while husbands went out. Now we have so many different formats of family now, and it's not like it's all of a sudden become a thing. It's just that people are now living their truest lives and their truest selves, and we love that for them. But attachment doesn't really reflect that. Like, attachment doesn't even really reflect the current distribution of household chores that mothers and fathers have, who takes part of child rearing the most. So you'll find that the majority of attachment science is actually on mothers. A lot of the stuff when it comes to parenting and child rearing is on mothers and not fathers, just because it still is the case that mothers or the birthing person is usually the primary carer of the child. So they're usually the one that gets to participate in all of the research. So attachment is a very Western thing, as a theory, not as an actual phenomena in humans. So it doesn't really take into account things like family support. Like, you know, some families have grandparents that do lots of child caring. Some families send their infants to daycare from 6 weeks, which is absolutely fine, especially when you don't have parental leave like in the US. So all of these kinds of things, these shifting in family dynamics, would actually cause a child to be less upset when a parent leaves, because they have a more distributed attachment network rather than a reliance on one solitary figure, which is what the attachment styles strange situation test that Ainsworth designed was based on. And plenty of research supports this. So the interesting thing about attachment theory these days is that it actually doesn't really fit modern Western child rearing, and it really doesn't fit non-Western child rearing at all. It doesn't think about communal child rearing, which is really that like village concept, right? Like, you've seen the funny things on TikTok, which are like, I heard there was a village, so like, when are they showing up? Or I heard it takes a village, when are they showing up? And that's that really traditional form of child rearing that we have done for millennia as humans, that we've only shifted out of since the Industrial Revolution. If you want to know more about how the Industrial Revolution really shaped child development and families and stuff, I have a whole podcast episode on it, which if you're on YouTube right now, scroll down, it's somewhere there. I think it's called Where Did It All Go Wrong? But yeah, it doesn't think about grandparents, it doesn't think about friends, it doesn't think about aunties and uncles in the familial, not the familial sense, but in the community sense. So if you're thinking about First Nations peoples, there's all sorts of different things. There's also different family structures in terms of like kids avoid adults in some cultures and run in packs. In other cultures, you cannot, a younger person cannot speak directly to an older person, and you cannot make eye contact and things like that. And there's so many different combinations, and they all seem to work. So when we talk about some of the cultural differences, like, this stuff has been documented for a long time. So Eisendorn and Kronenberg in 1988 documented just the distribution of, so that's the different rates of the different attachment styles in different cultures. So by far and away, secure attachment, which is the one that we're after, the one that leads to the best well-being outcomes for children. Sorry about the poodle interruption. Is by far and away the most common attachment style. So in the US, it's roughly like, I want to say 65% of kids that are securely attached. Some because that's just who they are as people, and others because of their parental responsiveness. This is the case for all attachment styles. Just remember that no matter what you do, sometimes your child could still be in that insecure attachment style, because there are things that contribute to it outside of you being the most perfect responsive parent. So never beat yourself up about that. So yeah, in the United States, it's about 65%, if I'm reading this graph in front of me correctly, that are secure. About 20% are insecure avoidant, and about 15% are insecure resistant. You can do the math. I'm not sure if that adds up to 100%, but this is what my graph is telling me. Now in Germany, which is ostensibly a pretty similar culture to the US, yes, I get it, they don't speak English, but it's still a similar culture. There are certainly things that they do differently to the US and Australia, but it still operates pretty similarly. However, what we see is that there's about 55% of children that are securely attached, so that's a 10% difference in secure attachment between the US and Germany already, there is, I want to say, a 35% frequency of insecure avoidant attachment. So that's jumping up from 20% in the US. And then there is maybe 10% of insecure resistant. So you're seeing that even into predominantly white cultures, that I'm pretty sure Germany is classed as a Western culture. Tell me if I'm wrong. We already see quite a big difference, right? And then we go to an Eastern culture like Japan. In Japan, there is a 70% of children are in the secure category of attachment. Only 5% of children are in the insecure avoidant category, and about 25 to 30% are in the insecure resistant category. So again, the distributions are different. Now, there's many reasons why this might be. One of them being that children in different cultures are interacted with in different ways with their families, which leads to a higher or lower amount of each particular kind of attachment style. So it doesn't mean that some countries are right and some countries are wrong. Absolutely not. It just means that there's different ways of raising children. So what I really want to say, and if I didn't say it in the last one, well, I'm definitely saying it now, is that we shouldn't take that 20-minute test, the strange situation test, that was designed to categorize children, and make huge assumptions about a child's whole future. I've already told you over and over again that attachment style can change, but also, like, the test itself is really vulnerable to change. It is vulnerable to whether a child is sick or tired or hungry, and it can change so many things. So as with all of developmental psychology, we take a lot of these paradigms with a grain of salt, and that's why I'm here walking you through the layman's terms of it and giving you kind of the grey in between the black and white that science is sometimes portrayed as being, because science isn't black and white. It is definitely grey. Okay. Scrolling into the next one. Oh, we have left attachment. So should we stop here and start the next lecture, which is Temperament 101? That is a great question. I'm thinking about it. There are many slides. Okay, we're only 10 minutes in. We're going to make this a 20-minute talk, okay? We're going to do 10 minutes of temperament, and then we'll do another lecture next week. Lecture? Chat? I don't know. I'm just trying to drink my coffee while it's still hot. Okay, so temperament. So temperament is the thing I've probably talked about already a couple of times in this lecture series. Temperament is the number one thing I will always bang on about and teach everyone about, because it's that unchangeable personality of your child that no matter what you do, if your child has a challenging temperament, it is going to be taxing on you, and it's not your fault. So I'm just going to move something so I can read my slide, because I haven't given this lecture in 2-ish years. So let's start again. Temperament is the individual differences in behavioral styles, emotions, and ways of responding to situations and people. So it can refer to how quickly emotions are shown, how strong they are, how long they last, and how quickly they fade away. Now, there is a questionnaire I use often that all developmental psychologists, I think, use. It's the Child Behavior Questionnaire, which kind of categorizes different levels of, or different types of temperament traits. And one of them is called hysurgency. And I don't even need to fill this survey out to tell you that my daughter is highly surgent. And that tells you that she is very quick to respond with emotions, hugely quick to frustration. So when I see, like, on Instagram those posts that are like, here's how to build frustration tolerance, I'm just like, fuck up. Like, it's temperament. Like, I can work on that, but it is not going to work as well as a child who is already inclined to a more chilled temperament. And I get it. Like, we can work on frustration tolerance, but frustration tolerance needs to be worked on for the parent as well as the child. And when you show, like, a simple 30-second reel of being like, this is how you do it, you hit like hit something with a hammer until they get the hang of it. That doesn't always work, and that it makes parents feel like failures. Because something that people always neglect to mention is that for things like frustration, if you have a highly surgent child, they are way more fast to frustration, way more likely to start screaming at you. I've always characterized my daughter as going from 0 to 100. And my mom used to be like, oh, that's just what all kids are like. Knowing that she never really saw what I saw. Because my daughter is great at keeping that craziness for just me, because that's who she feels safe with. And that's fine. We'll talk about that later. That's a whole different like masking thing. But anyways, so it can feel really invalidating when you see on social media, you just need to do this to like train your child to independent play. It's your fault that they don't know how to independent play. And that is absolutely not the case. A lot of it has to do with temperament. A lot of it has to do with how quick their nervous system is to freak out, their physiological responses. So it's not always your fault. And I just hate the fact that some experts are on here on social media doing that, making parents feel like shit unknowingly. They don't do it on purpose, but they are neglecting to say that this might be temperament based, and if your child can't do this yet, that's okay. You just need to do it at baby steps and try a little longer, or it just doesn't work and you can try something else. So yeah, when we talk about temperament being how quick emotions are to show, how strong they are, and how long they last, and how slowly they fade away, these are know that this varies amongst children, both within your family and between families. There is a huge difference. So my daughter is quick to respond with emotion with high intensity, but she also tends to not last very long, and they fade away really quickly as well. Now, what that does to me as a human is I have some extreme anxiety, and I'm pretty sure I now have high blood pressure. But that's because I'm also autistic, and I also have a temperament that is triggered by that. And so just like attachment is this dyadic relationship between two people and the call and response of a child and a mother, so too can temperament be, because your temperaments affect that relationship between mother and child and can then feed back to the mother and child in terms of their experiences. So it's all very there's so many things that contribute to this. So if you're feeling like a terrible parent or an asshole, go easy on yourself and start to think about, what's my child's temperament? Am I a failure because I'm a failure, or do I feel like a failure because my child is harder than my sisters or my brother-in-laws or my friend down the road or the people that are judging me or my mother? Are they judging me because they don't realize that temperament is a thing? Anyways, that was one slide of temperament so far, and that's 5 minutes. Good. This is going to take a long time. So in 1977, old school, I know, but we love seminal research when it hasn't really changed much. So in 1977, Chess and Thomas classified children into 3 categories: an easy child, a difficult child, and a slow to warm up child. So what we found was that I always talk about it's not we. So an easy child is classified by the following phrases. So is your child generally in a positive mood, quick to establish regular routines, and adapts easily to new experiences? If you say yes, they're an easy child. And that's about 40% of children from Chess and Thomas. So that's probably a US study on mostly white children, but this is what we know for now. I'm sure I've got more in here later, but if I don't, well, then I really need to update these slides, don't I? The next one is, do you tend to react negatively and cry frequently? Sorry, does your child? Do they engage in irregular daily routines? And are they slow to accept new experiences? If so, you might have a difficult child. We don't love the names because they tend to cause what's called the Pygmalion effect, where if you believed your child is something, you act in an accordance that would confirm that, and then the child then believes that that's what they're like. So then they do more of those behaviors, which then reconfirms your original thing, which is just a word that you've labeled your child. There's a bunch of research on this stuff. But anyways, So 10% of children sit in the difficult child category. This is my daughter. We were never able to, we still struggle with daily routines, which is so incredibly hard when the child is difficult and can't get into daily routines, and the mother, me, is autistic and needs routines. No wonder I had a nervous breakdown and I still have lots of trouble every day. But anyways, that's a difficult child. Then you have another one, which is, does your child have a low activity level? Are they somewhat negative? And do they display low intensity of mood? If so, we call those a slow to warm up child. And that's about 15% of babies as well. So now, if you're doing the math, 40, 10, 15, that's 65%. Where the heck is the other 35%? It's a great question. It's very reminiscent of attachment styles. Well, when there was only 3 attachment styles and 40% of babies or something didn't fit into another category. Same kind of thing. I don't think it was 40, I think it was 20 for the 4th attachment style. That's not relevant here though. So yeah, this is from 1977 though, so that's fair. Now, there is a couple of videos here which I don't think I'll show right now, mostly because I'm not sure if I'll get copyrighted for it. But if you guys really like this talk on temperament, I can dive into it deeper and maybe figure out a way to get these videos which really illustrate a behaviorally inhibited infant and an uninhibited child, which is really like your easy versus your difficult babies, in the 4 to 5 month olds. And then I think there's an example of them when they're older too, so age 10. And we can also talk through the child behavior questionnaire and some of the questions on there that kind of are indicators of what kind of temperament your child has if you feel like you need that validation. I can't share all of that because it's still like research property and we kind of use it to do research with. But we can talk about some of the indicators of temperament based on the questions from that scale. And that child behavior questionnaire and all the different variations for the different ages of the children and infants for classifying temperament have been validated in many, many countries. So that's a pretty good one to say. I would never call something universal unless it's been done in every single culture ever, but it's pretty generalizable across cultures. So that's pretty cool. Now, what is this slide about? Developmental connections. This might be the last one we touch on because we've just hit 20 minutes of recording for this talk. So here's just a few little random observations. So children who were highly active at age 4 were likely to be very outgoing at age 23. So that's Franz from 1996. Children who had an easy temperament at 3 to 5 years of age were likely to be well adjusted as young adults. And many children who had a difficult temperament were not well adjusted. This is from Chess and Thomas in 1977. Do not panic if your child has a difficult temperament, because parenting has so much to do with this. And what we do know from the research is that if you parent in that kind of like gentle parenting, authoritative parenting, responsive, warm, kind and understanding, perspective-taking style of parenting, your child who is difficult will end up just as well adjusted as a child whose temperament is easy, which means their nervous system doesn't get as freaked out. Or they could even end up better. So don't worry about your child's temperament equaling a death sentence for their future careers. It's not always the case. Well, most of the time it's not the case, as long as you are kind to yourself and your child and understanding. So yeah, that's just my little tidbit there so it doesn't terrify you. Now, individuals with an inhibited temperament in childhood are less likely to be assertive, which is your like inhibited's like you're slow to warm up, or to experience social support as adults and more likely to delay entering a stable job crack. Now, there's a lot of things that go into this with the inhibited temperament. One could be neurodivergence, one could be that inhibited temperament is conflated with trauma. So I think this one's really tricky to figure out if there is a stable link there. This is from WACHS in 2000. I haven't looked at the paper in a long time to tell you whether they took into account all those things and excluded those alternative explanations, but I find it highly unlikely that they did because it's hard to exclude a lot of that stuff. And highly reactive infants tend to avoid unfamiliar events in infancy and are often subdued. So that's like your difficult temperament again. They're cautious and they're wary of new situations in adolescence. Low reactive infants tend to approach unfamiliar events in infancy and be spontaneous and sociable in adolescence. So this probably contextualizes your experiences in life as well when you think about what kind of temperament you have or had as a child, and how it relates to your current experiences. I definitely am, I actually don't know. I need to go and do some therapy to figure out who I am and how I feel and what my temperament was. But also, I am autistic. I've said that so many times in this episode, I really need to stop. But it's just the best thing for me to have an identity about, like, I have an identity that explains why I'm different and I don't feel so much like a failure anymore. But I also want to make sure that even if you don't have an identity that explains why you're not a failure, I want you to know that you're not a failure, and that a lot of it comes down to innate behaviors. So innate means inborn, things that you are born with, like personality styles and stuff like that. But it's not like a be-all end-all. You can work with your temperament, you can work with your neurodivergence to build a beautiful life, and that's so fine. Okay, we are going to stop there. And we are going to pick back up on Temperament 101 next week, because we are only in slide 41 of 84. And guys, just remember that these lectures usually take about 2 hours to talk through. And I have been adding so much stuff that I have learned over the last 2 years as a content creator on social media for science communication and developmental science. I have learned so much in the last 2 years, more than I learned in the previous decade. Because in the previous decade, I was learning about a very specific, narrow field, which was imitation and learning and social robots and children. And I only just had like a very broad knowledge of developmental psychology. So yeah, this is going to take me some time, but that's why we're here every week for hopefully a 20 to 30 minute video max, every Tuesday, uploading this fun information for you. Tell me if you like it. Tell me if you hate me. Tell me if you hate the way I'm presenting the information. I don't edit these videos because I don't have time. Like, I do this before I start work on a Tuesday, and I have to smash it out, like, because I've already like had to drop my kid off early, an hour early to daycare, so I can do it. So I'm not editing them. So if you don't like the fact that they don't have like fun pop-up things or text on the screen, these videos aren't for you right now. I'd love to work towards that, but right now I don't have the time for it. So I want to be able to give you education and information in a chatty kind of style. I mean, you can always just turn the camera off or turn the video off and listen to it like podcast if you like. But yeah, this is where we're at. See you every Tuesday. Make sure you subscribe, follow for more new videos every Tuesday. I don't know. People say things. I hope you like it. I'll catch you next time, guys. Bye.